Welcome to I-24 News. I'm Sivan Raviv, and these are the latest developments coming to you live from Tel Aviv. Today is day 32 of Israel's war with Hamas, marking exactly 1 month to the October 7th atrocities that Hamas perpetrated against Israelis when it brutally entered their homes and attacked them, resulting in 1,400 murdered civilians, including many women and children. Additionally, 241 hostages were taken from within Israel and into Gaza. Israeli forces pushed further into the Gaza Strip overnight and were operating nearby the Shifa hospital, which is reportedly located above Hamas's command center, as the IDF continued to target Hamas's underground tunnel network and military capabilities. Following a 12-hour pause, Hamas rocket fire into southern Israel resumed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in an ABC interview that Israel will likely have to maintain security control over the Gaza Strip for an indefinite period after the war with Hamas is finished, illustrating to the catastrophic results of what was able to happen when it didn't. Let's have a listen.
President Biden has said that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza. Who should govern Gaza when this is over?
Those who don't want to continue the way of Hamas. It certainly is not. I think Israel will, for an indefinite period, will have the overall security responsibility, because we've seen what happens when we don't have it. When we don't have that security responsibility, what we have is the eruption of Hamas terror on a scale that we couldn't imagine.
A 69-year-old Jewish man by the name of Paul Kessler died overnight in Los Angeles following an assault he endured when a pro-Palestinian demonstrator struck his head with a megaphone, causing him to collapse and suffer from severe bleeding. He was transported to a nearby hospital, where he later died of his wounds. Over on Israel's southern border is our I-24 News correspondent Pierre Clochendler. Pierre, what can you tell us about the strikes that have been going on overnight?
Well, we know that fighting is going on. There was just an outgoing from the Israeli artillery where we are standing, not far away from the Gaza border. Now, the siege of Gaza City is tightening, and there's airstrikes on certain targets in Gaza City, and the ground forces are already operating inside Gaza City. Palestinians are reporting that the Israeli ground forces are a few hundred meters away from Shifa Hospital. Now, Shifa Hospital has been described by the IDF as the most important control and operational command center inside the Gaza Strip. Gaza City itself is probably, according to the IDF, the most important stronghold of Hamas military capabilities inside the Gaza Strip. And therefore, there's been a lot of pressure on Shifa Hospital. At this moment, what we hear is that, according to Palestinian reports yesterday evening, the solar panels of Shifa Hospital were annihilated by an Israeli airstrike. We don't exactly know what the purpose of that would be. And these, again, are Palestinian reports. But we know that the combination of all the armed branches of the IDF are working so tightly that, for instance, an F-35I, according to the Israeli chief of staff, bombed Hamas target 200 meters away from the Israeli ground forces. The Israeli ground forces were sheltering inside their armored vehicle. A bomb was unleashed on a Hamas target by an F-35I, and thus, immediately after the Israeli ground forces could assault that target, many terrorists were killed in that specific target. And this is the tightening not only of the Gaza City siege, but at the same time the tightening of the cooperation between all the armed forces of the IDF.
Thank you, Pierre Clochendler, on Israel's southern border. Joining us is retired Colonel Miri Eisen, Director of the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University. Hi, Miri.
Hello, Sivan.
Now, rocket fire resumed this morning towards southern Israel, but we see that the number of barrages towards Israel generally dropped. Does this mean, do you think, that Hamas is facing a limited ability to fire rockets now?
Well, some of it just has to do with numbers. We've always said that Hamas has probably 15 to 20,000 rockets. And as far as we can count until now, I'd say that they fired probably even 10,000. We do realize that there are hundreds, if not thousands, that have been fired towards Israel and have fallen in the Gaza Strip. So, Sivan, that means they still have capability. But we have dissected the Gaza Strip physically, in military senses, into two areas, to the north and to the south. And they have pretty much lost their capacity to really fire from the northern Gaza Strip because we are right there and can see immediately and immediately target when we are so close, even in the urban area. They're continuing to fire out of the southern Gaza Strip, which means that, yes, they still have the capacity, much more limited. I breathe in deep because I don't want anybody to think that because of this, we should be safer now. Hamas want to show that they can continue in their terms to fire the rockets, to give battle. They right now want to present themselves as if they are the ones who are battling and winning. So they have an interest to continue to fire. So we really need to be careful at this stage.
Now we're seeing live images from Gaza as you speak. If they're firing rockets from the southern area, then that means they are indefinitely firing from within the civilian population. Is that right?
Over the last few days, the IDF has been exposing, because we are now in the Gaza Strip, these are things that we've spoken about both here on I-24 News, but over the last decade, that Hamas build the different firing capabilities out of mosques, out of schools, out of kindergartens. And over the last few days, it's a war. It doesn't look the way you expect. The kindergarten doesn't look like a kindergarten anymore. It's the area within the mosque, but we've been showing the different launching locations from the kindergarten, from the school, from the mosque. So that's things that we're getting to, and it will continue to be. As I say, they've built this over a decade. It's still there with a lot of capabilities.
Now, Netanyahu said in an ABC interview that Israel will have to be responsible for the security in Gaza in the future. Is this a realistic goal, do you think?
In its own way, Sivan, and I say very harshly for me as an Israeli, is there any other realistic goal? We right now are not conquering all of the Gaza Strip. We are trying to get to the Hamas terrorists and our hostages in a variety of ways. There are 2.3 million people there. Hamas has ruled over the Gaza Strip from 2007, and look at what they have done. There is nobody else in the world who wants to step in right now. And until there is a viable, local, Palestinian-grown type of leadership that does not call and actively act to annihilate Israel, to attack Israel, then it's going to be Israel's responsibility. I really don't see us having another choice. I don't know what that means. I need to be very clear. I don't know if that means that we're ruling all over the territory. It's very hard to say at this stage, but this is the first time Netanyahu has said something at the sort, and we need to take it into account as Israelis. It may be the only of the bad choices, the only bad choice we can take.
Mary Eisen, thank you for your input. Please stay with us. We will be back to you. Joining us on Israel's northern border is our I-24 News correspondent, Zach Anders. Zach, Hamas Lebanon took responsibility for a barrage of rockets which hit northern Israel last night, with rockets reaching as far as the city of Haifa for the first time since the Lebanon War. What can you tell us about Hamas's involvement in the north?
Well, that strike reaching about 20-plus miles from the northern border is significant. Like you said, first time since the 2006 war, the rocket has reached this deep. The IDF late last night says that they did strike targets inside Lebanon that were related to the launch of these rockets. We have also been hearing outgoing artillery fire from our position. That was quite heavy last night as well, and they said that that was a combination of strikes with air strikes and artillery. They did not confirm if they had continued ground operations as well. Now, This is coming on the heels of over a dozen fatalities that Hezbollah itself is reporting in the month of November in these continued skirmishes, you could call it, on the northern border. These bordering on full-scale engagements with Hezbollah and Hamas inside the northern territories. But again, the IDF is telling us at this hour they did strike. They did strike those locations last night related to the launch.
And what's the situation on the ground? What are the instructions? We know that yesterday citizens were instructed to take shelter and to keep indoors. What's the situation today?
Well, and that is part of the last few days of hostilities here. And one of the concerns is that Hezbollah is attempting to, they say, enact some retribution for civilians that were killed in Lebanon. They say they want to, they plan to create the same level, inflict the same level that if a civilian dies in the north in Lebanon, that they will do the same to Israeli citizens here on the other side of the border, the northern border here. The call right now is to evacuate. The continued call to evacuate has been in place, but the Ministry of Tourism is offering more long-term permanent solutions for people that need to be relocated in the south. They haven't given a timeline for how long that could be. In some communities, they're asking people to lock their doors and to secure their property. Overall, just a very tense situation here.
Zach Anders, thank you very much, on our northern border. And joining us once again is retired Colonel Mary Eisen. Mary, we've been hearing from Zach on our northern border and from other reports about Hamas in Lebanon and their kind of activity, and how are they taking a more active role in the fighting on the northern border?
So let's put things into perspective. Lebanon as a country has almost 10 million people. Lebanon has had a relatively significant Palestinian refugee population from 1948 in Palestinian refugee camps. Hamas, that has grown from the Gaza Strip but exists throughout the Palestinian arena, both in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, and of course in Lebanon. Hamas has been firing from day one. They've been trying to engage and use their Palestinian base from day one. The Palestinian Hamas leaders, Ismail Haniyeh, Salah al-Arouri, these are ones who are directly involved in both the planning and execution of the October 7th attack and in giving out this fake, lying information about that attack. They're based in Lebanon. So Hamas is already there. It is Hezbollah who allows them to act. Hezbollah is a terror organization. Hezbollah is also Lebanese. So Hezbollah is the one that in the south of Lebanon especially, you have to get their approval. You have to be sure that you kind of okay it with them when you fire the rockets, when you do their different actions. But let's be clear, the rockets yesterday, the claim was by Hamas. They cannot fire those rockets without Hezbollah full approval. But over the last 30 days in this war that Hamas started, Hezbollah is an active participant. They haven't done it to the level of war that they could do, and that's part of the challenges we face right now. But when they allow such a barrage of rockets, what they're doing is they're letting out a bit more. They keep going a bit further from the immediate border. They're attacking into Israel daily. They have killed Israeli citizens, not daily, thank God. They've been firing against civilian targets, military targets in the state of Israel from October 7th. Hezbollah and those Palestinian factions. So as we go forward, again, this is part of the pressure that they're trying to make to impact Israel in the south. If we were talking before about Hamas, and we're talking about Hamas's headquarters under the Shifa hospital, this is Hamas trying to take it to a different arena to lessen the pressure on them in the Gaza Strip. And it's not going to work, but it's very disturbing. We're all aware of that. None of us want that additional front, Sivan.
Okay, so exactly, according to the reports, as you say, Israeli forces are operating close to the Shifa hospital, where it was revealed that there is a significant Hamas underground infrastructure. But how can Israel eliminate this terrorist threat when located in a civilian facility?
Here we are, Sivan, and here we are this month into this impossible, incomprehensible war, one that's not like anything we've ever seen. And we keep wanting to compare it to anything, and I can't compare it. We're in 2023, and the terror organization builds their headquarters under a hospital. There is no easy answer for that. I will say Israel would never attack and destroy the hospital. But there are a lot of varieties of different ways of infiltrating, of trying to do something else. How do you save the civilian lives that Hamas are so putting into the front lines? How do you do so? These are the challenges we face. I don't have an answer for our viewers or for myself right now. I do think that these are the things that we're looking at. We can't allow Hamas to continue to do so, and we will never target the civilians in the hospital. And within that, let's think outside the box and see how we do something different. Different, by the way, is not sci-fi. Different is within the rules of engagement, the rules of war, the war that Hamas, that homicidal, genocidal terrorist organization, started against Israel and is continuing to do against Israel over the last 30 days.
Mary Eisen, thank you very much. Now, joining us in New York is political and international security analyst Martin Himmel. Martin, what do we know about this latest fatal attack on a Jewish man in Los Angeles?
Well, it appears to be there was a demonstration in a North Los Angeles suburb, and an altercation broke out between this man who was very pro-Israeli and protesting on behalf of Israel, and a pro-Palestinian demonstrator. It became a fight, a violent fight. And in the process, he was either struck in the head or he was pushed, and his head struck against the pavement. He basically had a brain hemorrhage, was taken to the hospital, and died in the hospital. It's the first example of that I know of in this recent wave where a Jewish demonstrator has been killed for his beliefs and his protests.
That is an unfortunate incident, and there is a rise in anti-Semitism in the U.S. and around the world. What are your personal impressions of that? How have you experienced this in New York?
Well, you go to certain Starbucks, because Starbucks, for example, has a union, and they're pro-Palestinian, and here and there you see Free Palestine imprints on the doorways of Starbucks, for example. That's just a small example, but there's heightened security with synagogues. There are demonstrations, big demonstrations in Washington, pro-Palestinian. There was a big demonstration in New York, pro-Israeli. There's a great sense of insecurity among the Jewish population here. And there is serious organized protests against Israel. And this is having an effect also on the Biden administration. President Biden got very bad results on his polls in key states that he must win in order to defeat his rival Donald Trump, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania. And Michigan has got a very strong pro-Palestinian entity there. He needs every vote he can get. And so this will put pressure on him to modify the American stand as well in the war that's going on. I don't think he'll drop his backing for Israel, but he might lean harder on the issue of helping humanitarian efforts in Gaza in order to placate those voters in Michigan and places like that.
So yes, we've seen Biden's stance towards Israel was very supportive thus far, and the polls, like you say, are showing that Donald Trump is leading in some key states. Do you think that this will change Biden's stance completely, or is this just a little bit?
I think it might modify his stance. It's not going to change it completely. I think the basic tenets of American foreign policy is to support Israel in this fight against Hamas. I think that he might want to put constraints on Israel, less airstrikes, more humanitarian corridors. And I think the time that Israel has to actually attain its goals may be a lot shorter than the government thinks, because without absolute 100% American support, it's going to be a problem, and that support could erode over time.
Now, speaking of American politics, we see Kamala Harris very involved in the diplomatic efforts surrounding this war, something we haven't seen too much of before. What do you think brings on this change?
I think it's just another tool that President Biden is using. He's got Anthony Blinken in the region. I think Kamala Harris has given an opportunity here to take action in the foreign policy venue. She's done it before. It's not the first time. And I think he's using every tool in his arsenal, every human tool in his arsenal to try to keep the war localized in the Middle East and keep his allies on his side and on the side of the policy that's going on here. It's a very serious problem for the United States. It definitely sees an Iranian threat here. It definitely sees a need to eradicate Hamas, but it's also hitting Biden in the polls, and he needs to solve this problem as soon as possible. He does not have that much time, so therefore that can affect Israel's time in dealing with this crisis as well.
International security analyst Martin Himmel, thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
Diplomatic relations between Israel and Turkey, which had been on the mend after years of tension, are now back in the deep freeze. Turkish President Recep Erdogan is now back to attacking Israel, calling its Gaza operation one of the bloodiest and most savage attacks in history, and defending Hamas as a liberation rather than terrorist group. Against that backdrop, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken made a surprise visit yesterday to Ankara. Senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman takes a closer look in this report.
They'll give a warm handshake and pose for the cameras, but relations between the United States and Turkey are as tangled as ever, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken sweeping through Ankara Monday, meeting with his Turkish counterpart, and capping his trip through the Middle East.
And of course, we discussed the crisis in Gaza, and including the efforts to significantly expand humanitarian assistance to people in need, efforts to prevent the conflict from spreading to other parts of the region.
In Turkey, that's a hard sell. Outside the Turkish Foreign Ministry, dozens came to protest Blinken's visit. And a day earlier, many more converged on the Incirlik Air Base in Turkey's south, where U.S. troops are stationed.
Both the police and soldiers would want to go to Gaza and fight, and they will go when the time comes. Turkish military to Gaza.
Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was notably not in Ankara for Blinken's visit, perceived by many as an intentional snub.
It is our responsibility for our Palestinian brothers to be saved from Israeli cruelty and for the massacres happening in Gaza in front of the world's eyes to be stopped.
Turkey continues to host a number of Hamas leaders and has withdrawn its ambassador to Israel. But Erdogan has said he will not break ties with Israel fully. He has a Muslim world to try to win over, but also an American ally to keep on side.
1 month after the Hamas massacre at the Nova Music Festival down south, a cameraman was for the first time able to film the scorched cars belonging to the victims and survivors of this tragedy. This vehicular graveyard has become a telling memorial of sorts to the horrors that took place on the Gaza border 1 month ago. More in this report.
This huge open-air site bears the scars of Hamas massacres. Here, hundreds of scorched, bullet-riddled and ransacked cars belonging to the victims and survivors of the Nova Festival. On the ground, investigators are screening the whole area. Their objective? To identify the owners of the vehicles.
The first job is any cars that we found human remains in. We want to make sure that no human remains are pretty much being sent to the trash. So they go through and they sift through everything to try to find all the remaining, all the remains left. And the second thing is, if we have anybody who we don't know what happened to them, we don't know if they were murdered or if they were kidnapped.
An effort that has already paid off. Laura recounts how taking refuge with her husband and 5 friends in the caravan saved their lives.
We were in the trailer from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. The terrorists tried to open the trailer, they shot at the trailer, they tried to burn it. They wanted to kidnap us, I think. I came because I'm trying to find answers to why all my friends are dead and I am alive. How did this plastic thing save our lives? It just doesn't make any sense.
Safe and sound, but still in shock, Laura hopes one day to find the strength to go to musical events again.
I've been wondering for a month if I'll ever be able to go dancing at a festival. I know that my friends who are no longer here would like us to continue. For the moment, I haven't got on with my life. I don't sleep, I don't eat. Sadly, it's still a long way from dancing, but I think it's our duty to a certain extent.
Noam Alon, who has also come in search of answers, is hoping for the release of his girlfriend.
We know that she tried to escape from the terrorists, but at one point she was caught because she couldn't keep running. Later, Hamas released a video showing 4 terrorists around her. We see her wounded. We hope she's alive. This is the last piece of evidence of her being alive. I came here today to ask our government to do everything in its power to bring back the hostages, even if we have to release Palestinian prisoners, supply them with fuel, or sign a ceasefire.
A short distance from the site, investigations are continuing in Reim, where the Nova Festival took place. 270 people were slaughtered by Hamas on October 7th.
That's all for this latest edition of I-24 News. Be sure to follow us on our website, i24news.tv, and across all our social media platforms on Twitter, also known as X, and on Instagram. I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you for watching. We'll keep you posted.